Good day, crew. In this video I'm going to continue on from last week, and we're going to talk about everything you need to go crabbing, as well as a few things that make it easier and ensure that you get a good catch of crabs. I used to use the light pots back when money wasn't quite so plentiful. I've probably over the years bought maybe 16, 20 of them. Lost a few. Other than that, they rusted out or otherwise broke, and not worth fixing them. Just toss them and get a new one. But they do have other drawbacks. They play off in a strong current, and they just really don't seem to be quite as good at catching crabs as the heavy-duty pots I'm using now. But there's no doubt they do work, and if it's all you can afford, you will catch crabs in them. No doubt about that. But now, all they are is ornaments on my boat port, just to give it a nautical feel. These are the pots I use now. I got them from Mr. Bait at Hemmant. These ones have got the aluminium supports in them. Really easy to set up and take down again. I also have these other pots here from Mr. Bait. I got these before the newer ones that collapse easier. These are heavy duty pots as well, but they've got the PVC pipe in there to hold them apart. They're really good pots. They certainly caught a lot of crabs over time, and I still use them. I have 3 of the newer pots. I like them better just because they're so much easier to put up and collapse. I use these for the 4th pot when I'm taking 4 out, and I use 5 of them when I'm taking 8 out. So nothing wrong with them as pots. They're a little bit cheaper and certainly catch the crabs. So you can feel confident buying these pots that you're going to catch some in them. So these are haze pots. This is the other option. Cockatoos are in good voice today. So are the butcherbirds. Butcherbird's asking for dinner. I haven't fed him yet. Anyway, these are haze pots. They're great pots if you want to check your pots regularly. Like, you can come back 20 minutes after you drop it and find crabs in it. So if you're running 8 pots, let the birds go past. If you're running 8 pots, you can drop them off and then pretty much come back around and start pulling them up, getting your crabs out, dropping them again, and just keep circling around the 8 pots. If you're driving slowly, of course. About 20 minutes between checks, half an hour at the most. It's a bit awkward with only one hand to hold the phone and show you. The way they work is they come up like this, and they've got that big opening in the top. And the crabs crawl up the side of the cone and in that opening at the top. But crabs swim, so they can swim straight out of that again if you don't check them regularly. That's the whole idea. Check them regularly, get your crabs out. They'll get in there real quick because it takes them no time at all to find that opening. I use them a lot if I'm prospecting an area and I want to find out where the crabs are, and I've got the time to spend checking the pots. I'm not planning on going out anywhere else to do some fishing. I'll take these out and drop them off and check them as often as I can. Just find out what depth the crabs are holding at. They've got these floats on them, and that makes sure that they hold up. That black ring is buoyant, and the float there as well keeps the rope up well off the pot unless the crabs get in. As I say, a great pot if you're checking regularly or if you're prospecting a new area. I'll put a link in the video description where you can buy them. Just a quick product review of this. I got these crab pot tags from Mr. Bait, and I'm going to give them a go. Hopefully they're going to hold the writing a bit better than the shiny plastic ones I've been using. I'm going to use the standard marker pen on them, see how that goes. And I'm also going to use an acrylic paint pen on the other side and put it on there. And I'll see how each one goes, how long they last, and I'll give you some feedback on that after a dozen or so uses. So be a couple of months away, but if you subscribe to my channel, you'll catch up to it eventually. It'll probably just be a quick short, or I might just mention it in one of the other videos, let you know how it works. I think one of the best things about them is going to be that they're sort of like a zip tie. Once you get it on, the only way it's coming off is to cut it. Now, that doesn't mean the crab pot thieves aren't going to cut it, but it's just one more thing. I've got this thicker rope. If you've been watching my videos when I've been crabbing, you've heard me complain about pulling up that thin rope. It's pretty hard on the hands. It does have the advantage of not much drag in the water, but I'm using the heavy pots, so this should be fine. I wouldn't use the heavy rope with light pots, so just point that out. But if you've got heavy pots, I reckon this heavy rope will be a lot easier to pull up. Anyway, it comes in a 200 metre roll. You can get shorter lengths. I got it from Mr. Bait over at Hemmant. And I'm cutting it into 15 metre lengths. Now, 15 metres is a bit of an overkill. I usually crab in 5 to 10 metres, but sometimes I go deeper. And if you're shallower, you can create a coil on your rope just under the float and zip tie it together so that you've not got too much rope out if you prefer. It's a sinking rope, so it shouldn't really matter. Anyway, I cut one master length and then I measure everything else off it. Now, if I want 15 metres, I want to be reasonably right with it. I don't want to guesstimate each rope. Try and keep the roll flat and unrolling. That saves it twisting the rope as it comes off. Okay, cutting off. And the first thing that rope does is fray all up. So you want a cigarette lighter or a lighter like this and burn the end, melt it right back. Make sure you get it good and melted. And you want to wet your fingers. You can dip them in water, but I find spit is a bit thicker and protects your fingers a little bit better. Because even with that on, it didn't burn or hurt at all, but I still got a bit of the plastic or nylon-y rope stuck to me. But because I had very wet fingers, it didn't hurt at all. If you try to do it without wetting your fingers, you'll know all about it. Yeah. If it catches fire, just blow it out. Okay, that's all you need to do. That'll never unravel again now. When they cut it, when they make the rope and cut it, I think they've got some electric gizmo that just sears the end of it. And then when they cut it, they must have a cutter that holds the ends together because they do a really neat job of it. But what I just did works fine. And I've got enough rope done now for 8 crab pots, which my wife comes out with me, that's all we can put out. So I've got all this spare for replacements, and that's probably the best part of 100 metres there. I always keep my ropes together with the floats, and I use a snapper clip to attach it to the pot. I find that just keeps it all neater. Some people attach the rope permanently to the pot and coil it up there and use a shark clip to put the floats on. The whole thing is to keep them separate, because if you've got the floats attached to the pot all the time, it's hard to store them. It's a lot easier to store them if they're separate. I just got to undo this knot here. And if it's too hard to undo, I'll just cut the thing, but I think it should undo. Maybe, or not. Oh yeah. This is where I can fast forward this when I edit the video. Right, let's got that off. Put it down there. I always use 2 plates on my crab pots too, because you can see which way the rope's lying when you drive up to it. As you can see, that rope is at least twice as thick as the old one, so that'll be a lot easier on the hands when you're pulling it up. I'll use a Centauri knot to tie this on. I've never had one of them fail on me yet. Another Centauri knot on this one. Okay, got that much of it. Right, no way that's coming undone. And that's what this little bit of string here on the bottle's for. You just loop the rope up and then tie that up in a nice neat little bow. And because I got thicker rope, I could have used a bit longer piece of string there. That was sort of size for the old rope, but It'll work, so that's all you need. That's ready to go crabbing. That's the solid foam float that you need. Whatever float you choose to get has to be a light colour, and it has to be 15 centimetres in any direction as a minimum. You can have a cube or rectangle, whatever you want, as long as it's 15 centimetres minimum in any dimension. I always tie a milk bottle on as well, but I cover my legal requirement by putting that wall float on, and then I attach a milk bottle that I paint up to some bright colour. Now, 2 reasons, both of them I believe are good reasons. One, I can identify my pots from quite a distance away. I don't have to go up to the pot and check that my name's on it. And 2, because the milk bottle's trailing out, I always know which direction to approach the pot from because I know where the rope is going to be sitting. So both of them are good reasons for putting a second plate on. Yeah, you can paint any pattern you like on your second plate if you want to identify it. I use yellow and orange, solid colours, but you can paint tiger stripes on it. Whatever you want to help you identify your float without having to go up really close and inspect the name on it. Some people camp their crab pots and they get a bit excited if they see people going too close to their pots. With good reason, because there's a lot of crab thieves around that'll pull their pots up and steal their crabs. I don't want to be mistaken for one. Now that's a snapper clip. You'll want one of them for each pot if you do them the way that I'm doing them. You can pick them up from Mr. Bait if you're buying your stuff from Mr. Bait. Other tackle shops probably have them, but if not, I'll put a link in the video description where you can buy some. And Mr. Bait's just started carrying these Cold Pro crab measurers. They're pretty good, they're nice and compact, not like some of the big things you get in other brands. If you're in any doubt, there's a little bit of information on the back. Tells you how to tell the male and females apart if you're new to crabbing. Shows you how to measure the mud crabs and the sand crabs. You measure them differently, as well as the spanner crabs. They're measured front to back. Shows you there where you're measuring the blue swimmer crabs in greater detail. That's just giving you the measurement there. You can see in there that you're measuring that first notch, inside that first notch. But on the mud crabs, you're measuring to the outside of the spikes. So it makes a difference. Spanner crabs, of course, front to back, from where the tail meets the body to the front of the carapace. So yeah, anyway, that's them. I got one, and that's what I'm going to be using from now on. It looks like it's anodised, so no corrosion on the aluminium. All good. When I took the packet apart, on the inside of the paper or cardboard, there's a whole heap of information on the current Queensland laws. You can't take the females, of course. I hope everyone knows that as crabbing. It's got the possession limits, and it talks about the closed season for spanner crabs, as well as 3-spot crabs. Mentioned they're the same size as the spanner crabs, except you measure them the same as you do the sand crabs. They don't actually show the 3 spots, but you can't miss the 3 spots. They've got 3 big spots across their back. Don't catch too many of them, but they're quite nice eating. They are a bit on the smaller side though, a bit smaller than the sand crabs. So often I just toss them back. If you're planning on doing a lot of crabbing and catching a lot of crabs, then it's a good idea to have a decent tub on board to empty the crab pots into. If it's just me going out, I don't take it, because by yourself you're only allowed 4 pots. So I generally just empty them out by hand and put the keepers straight into the esky. But if I'm going out with someone else and we've got 8 pots out, then I try and take a tub just to make it a bit easier to empty them out. You can toss them all into the tub and then sort them out of the tub. It's easier than grabbing them out one at a time. You can buy a cheap tub off one of the dollar shops, but this one here, I've had this tub since, oh geez, it would have to have been 40 years now, and it's still going strong. I don't remember how much it cost. It wasn't a cheap tub, but 40 years worth out of it, and it'll see the rest of my lifetime out. It's a decent tub. I look after it, don't leave it out in the sun, keep it in the shade all the time. You can't go wrong with one of these tubs. I got it from a butcher's supply place. I don't know where else you can buy them. If you don't want to buy one of these, grab one out of a dollar shop. You can pick them up cheap as chips. They won't last all that long, but it'll get you going. Birds are in good form today. The idea of having the tubs very straightforward. Just open the top of your crab pot, tip it upside down and shake vigorously. Sometimes the crabs will slide out fairly easily, other times they'll latch onto whatever they can to try and stop from sliding out. So just shake more vigorously. That makes the crabs dizzy. When they get dizzy they let go and fall out. Pretty simple really. It's time to talk about bait. Everyone knows you're not going to catch anything without bait, but what's the best bait for crabs? Well, I've always done best with mullet, tuna or bonito for crabs. You can use any fish frames. I use any fish frames when that's all I've got. There's a trick to using other fish frames that can help you catch a few more crabs. I'll go into that in a minute. But for now I'll just stress any oily fish. So bonito and tuna are in the same family, very oily fish. Mac tuna make great bait. Mullet's a good fish. Always use a fresh bait. Make it as fresh as possible. I've heard people say that you need a rotten, smelly piece of bait to attract crabs. It's a lot of rubbish. They like eating fresh bait, same as anyone else likes eating fresh feed. And they'll come to the pot with the freshest. And I know we're talking about sand crabs here, but I'll just mention that I think you do a little bit better for mud crabs using chicken frames, but not so good for sand crabs. And mullet heads are okay. They have the virtue of being cheaper than mullet, but if you're wanting to catch a lot of crabs, try and get the full mullet. Cut it in half so you let the smell out of the gut cavity and put it in your bait bag. One full mullet per pot. And if you put them in the morning and you're leaving them in overnight, go in the late afternoon and put another half mullet in with it. Then drop them back for the night's sake. Bit hard to tell in that bag. That's a mackerel frame out of the freezer, what's left of it. That's in the same sort of oily category as tuna, so that's a good bait as well. And this is a bait that just surprised the hell out of me. The bay is full of grinners, and I never found anything that eats grinners. I've had people tell me that they get bites on snapper. I've never had a bite putting a grinner down for snapper, and I've talked to several other people who reckon they've never had a bite putting a grinner down for snapper. However, surprised the hell out of me. I short a bait one day and I had a few grinners that I'd caught. I threw them in the crab pot and the crabs loved them. So from then on, whenever I catch grinner, I put them straight in the bait bucket, bring them home, freeze them up for the next time I go out and put them in the crab pots. The crabs like eating them. I always put them in with at least half a mullet. I think the mullet's got a more oily texture and attracts them into the pot better. But once they're in there, they're more than happy to eat the grinner. Given the number of grinners there are in Moreton Bay, there's a good cheap crab bait. Just keep your grinners, freeze them up and use them next time you go out. And don't forget some crab burley. What? I hear you say? What's crab burley? Well, you don't always need it. If you're using tuna, for instance, probably don't worry about the burley. It's going to be just fine. Mullet, maybe, maybe not. Doesn't really matter if you don't have it. Maybe improves your catch a bit if you do. But if you're using reef fish, which aren't a very oily fish, if you're using fish frames from your last outing, then definitely include some burley. It will help attract the crabs in. And this is what you need for the crab burley. You start off with a little plastic container and cut a bit of kitchen sponge. Put that in it. Now, this is a salt and pepper shaker. That side of it's too big, and that side of it's just right for a slow release of the smell that's going to be inside of it. You want a salt and pepper shaker because you want to be able to close it up so that it doesn't leak all over your boat and make a mess. Believe me, it is a mess if it leaks. I'll put a link in the video description where you can buy these because sometimes they're a little bit hard to come by. And then you fill them up with the secret ingredient, and that's key to the whole thing. That's what brings the crabs into the pot. And this is the secret ingredient, and no, it's not rice bran oil. It is tuna oil. It just happens to have been decanted out into a rice bran oil container so they could keep it all in one spot. I think what happened was the container I bought it in got knocked and started to leak, so I put it into this one. But it is tuna oil. It's not pure tuna oil. It's adulterated. It's a mixture of other fish oils and tuna oil, but it does the job. It's cheaper than raw tuna oil, and it brings the crabs in just fine. So what you do is you put some in this container and let the sponge soak it up, and then just as you drop your crab pot, open that lid up and let the burley seep out. That oil will spread through the water along with the current and bring all the crabs into your pot. Needless to say, that goes in your bait bag along with your bait. I don't think I mentioned that, but yes, put that in your bait bag along with your bait. And just remember, before you drop it over, after you've lifted that lid up, you want to keep it upright. Otherwise, your oil's going to pour out into your bait. Don't want that. And when you're pulling your crab pot up, as you lift it in, just make sure that you keep that upright so, again, the oil doesn't pour out all over your bait. Now for the crabs. I've done videos on this before, but I'll do it again just for this one. Lift that. I use a knife to lift it because after you've done 20 crabs, your thumb gets a bit sore. Mine does anyway, so use a knife to lift it. Break it open and then pull it backwards. That strips out most of those guts straight away. Take your knife and just run it along there. Get rid of its gills. Like that. A lot easier on your fingers than trying to do them with your thumbnail. And then pull off his mandibles like that. After that, we'll hose him out. You get pretty quick at it when you're not telling people how to do it. It goes pretty quickly. Speaking about quickly, my wife hadn't had crabs or fresh crabs until I started catching them, cooking them, and I had to show her how to get the meat out of them. But she's a good student. She does 2 crabs to my 1 now. She is really quick at it. Probably says something about how much she likes eating them too. I hold them this way with the claws away from me, and then just get the hose and just squirt the insides out like that. Just make sure you got it all. That's all there is to it. My wife and I have tried the crabs cooked without doing this. You know, leave the shell on and just cook them and then shell them, and this way. And I can assure you they taste much better this way, at least to us. Boil the water, put salt in it. Putting 7 crabs in that amount of water, I put 6 dessert spoons of salt in there. We're running 2 pots to cook 7 crabs in each. You need to cool them down as soon as you finish cooking them. We put some ice in the water here, 2 to 3 dessert spoons full of salt in there, give it a whiz round so it dissolves. That'll just let them suck in that salt as they cool down. Gives them a really nice flavour, and you have to cool them to stop the cooking, otherwise they'll overcook from the heat if you don't throw them in ice water. So they're still hot when they come off the boil. You need to cool them down straight away. Throw the crabs in gently so you don't splash yourself. Let's set it in that one. And the remains of combat in the pots. May as well cook them as well. There we go. Wait for it to come back to the boil and then start your timer. With that amount of crabs, I'd give it 10 minutes. If you're only cooking 1 or 2 crabs, you could probably give it 7 minutes. Depends on the bulk of meat that's in there. When that comes back to the boil, I'll turn it down to a dead simmer and give it 10 minutes on simmer. Take them out and cool them straight away. Okay, that's back to the boil. I'll turn it down to a simmer now. We will cook on gas. I reckon it's much better to cook on gas. I can control the heat more. That'll give us about a simmer in a minute. We'll cool it down, start to simmer. I'll show you what a simmer looks like just in case you don't know. you're not sure, that's what a simmer looks like, just little bubbles, not boiling its head off. And just leave it like that for 10 minutes. Lid off and get everyone to stand back in case the handles break. Be ready to jump out of the way yourself. Shouldn't break, but nevertheless. And then tip the water straight out into the sink. Oh, okay, well, wasn't quite quick enough to stop them going in. Pair of tongs. Make sure all your crabs are submerged in the cold water. It'll suck up the salt in the water. We'll leave it in there for 10 minutes to cool down, and then we can take them out, drain them and put them in the fridge. That's all there is to cooking crabs. And that's it for this video. I've covered everything you need for crabbing. I've given you a few tips. The thicker rope, putting some burley in the pot, picking the right bait, having the tubs there. Do make sure that you don't take any female crabs. Make sure your crabs are all of size, and make sure you don't take any empty crabs. I haven't shown you that because I didn't have a crab handy. I will try to mention that next time I go crabbing, so stay tuned for that video. Basically, you just pinch on the shell. If the shell's soft, throw it back, it's empty. If the shell's hard, it's probably full. I'll show you where on the shell to pinch to make it easiest. And as I said, hopefully I'll remember to do that in the next video. If you look at the last video, in the last video I put some crabbing areas that I go regularly to, around Cleveland Point and also up towards Wellington Point. There's plenty of areas to go crabbing. I've given some areas in previous videos. I'll put a link to the playlist that's got them down in the video description below. But there's heaps of crabs around Green Island. You get them over at Gate and Peel and up on Naval Banks, etc, etc, etc. Moreton Bay usually has more crabs than the proverbial. You can find them somewhere, you just got to look. I've given you some starting points, so if you're new to crabbing, you should be able to go out there with a reasonable confidence of coming back with at least 1 or 2 crabs, and hopefully with a lot more than that. If you want to get some good gear at reasonable prices and some good advice, go and see Mr. Bait at Hemmant. I'll put his contact details and address down in the video description as well. If you can't get to him at Hemmant, I'll put some online links that you can use to buy some of the equipment and probably just find the rest at your local tackle shop. So best of luck, get out there and catch some crabs. Until next time, good fishing.